Politicians and celebrities make deals behind closed doors, promises broken, and their income soars. Hidden agendas run the grand parade. In the circus, choose to masquerade. Believe me, I wouldn't lie. I've been given money, power, and fame to keep you in line.
Welcome, everyone, today to the podcast. We have a real therapist here as our guest today. So we're going to be talking about relationships, intimacy, and get some insights on the skills we need to be successful in this area of our lives. But before we begin, Risa, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to specialize in couples therapies?
Oh, sure. So, what led me to specialize in couples therapy started when I was about, I want to say 10 years old, when I went to sleepaway camp. And of the 12 girls in the bunk with me, my parents were the only parents who were still married. And at 10 years old, that really struck me. I remember writing an impassioned letter home to my parents about it. And my mother saved it for many years. And so that's certainly something that stands out in my experience. But when I was the kind of kid whose friends would always come to me for relationship advice. What do I do about this? This guy's, talking to that other girl. What do I do? So I was just sort of part of my relating to my friends, and went on to study psychology. I knew immediately that I wanted to study psychology, but while I was in college, I really experienced that something was missing as I was studying things about behavior and psychology, and I didn't quite know what it was that was missing until a friend of mine introduced me to the study of marriage and family therapy. Now, this was back in the 80s, and uh, it was marriage and family therapy wasn't new in the 80s, but it was building its recognition at that time. And when I heard about that, I said, that's the missing piece. Like, we don't operate in this world on an island. We're always interacting, and our families and the systems within which we live influences significantly how we are shaped, how we behave, how we interact, how we feel, things like that. And so I went on to study marriage and family therapy in graduate school, and uh, did many different places that I worked until I opened my own practice, which I knew I wanted to specialize in working with couples. Uh, Primarily because I think it's a significant part of what influences our world, our families, and I wanted to help strengthen that, part of people's lives. So I still remember the first couple that I worked with. I think I was like 21 years old. I mean, I was a baby, and here I was working with couples. They were very brave to come work with a 21-year-old, quite honestly. It was a university setting, and we worked with families outside of the university. Like, it was not for students, the therapy we were doing in school. It was for the community. I still remember them. Certainly won't say their names, but I remember them fondly, and they hold a special place in my heart.
Awesome. So I also studied psychology and was getting my master's in marriage and family therapy.
Neat. Oh, I didn't know that, Kat. Fabulous.
Yeah. But I did stop because I'm going to wait till after my kids are older and then go back later because I have time. So give us a little bit of some definitions. The first one I want to ask is, what is artificial intimacy?
Sure. So, in a way, before I can give you the definition of what artificial intimacy is, I want to talk about what intimacy actually is. because what we think of as intimacy tends to be sharing everything, every thought, every feeling. It tends to be spending all our time together. Uh, what comes to mind for you, Kat, when you think of what intimacy is?
Probably like being able to be honest in yourself and not have to like, you know, walk on eggshells or sugarcoat anything and just be accepted for like whatever, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you're saying us. I'm not totally sure. I think a lot of us are not totally sure. And we have these images through movies and, whatever, entertainment that gives us what we think it should be, but it's not really clear. And I think a lot of us struggle with, well, what is it and what is it that I really want in an intimate relationship? And the fact is, an intimate relationship looks different for each couple. Like defining what intimacy is going to look different for me and my husband than it is for you and your partner or anybody else and their partner. But the piece that I think you're touching on that I see as intimacy is what I refer to as, and this is from my mentor Terry Real and his mentor Pia Melody, the intersection of truth and love is where intimacy is found. Truth of who I am, like you were referring to, truth of what I need, truth of, well, when you do this thing, it upsets me, and I need us to deal with that truth, right? And love, which is I'm bringing up these truths because I want to connect with you. Not in the sense of this is true for me, and therefore you have to do everything that I'm asking for. That's not like that's pounding someone over the head with a hammer. That's not love, right? It's demanding. Love is not demanding. Um, so there's nuance to it, and it takes skill to speak about truth, the intersection of truth and love, to speak from that place. So authenticity sort of gets pushed as I have to be my authentic self and do what I do because that's who I am, but that's very individual thinking. And a lot of the work that I do with couples is helping them recognize the difference between thinking in an individualistic way and thinking in a relational way and behaving in a relational way versus behaving in an individualistic way. Um, so that's what true intimacy is in the broad sense. And a lot of times, we sort of think of if you were to Google, what's the opposite of intimacy? The opposite is like distance and aloofness and coldness. But there's something deeper in a relationship um, that's void of intimacy in experiencing that distance. Does that make sense? Like, there's something much deeper. Um, Let me put it this way, the absence of conflict is not intimacy. I know a lot of couples who don't have any conflict. They say, we never fight. That doesn't mean they're intimate. It's sort of like just as the absence of disease doesn't mean there's health. So if we think of it in that way and try and look at, well, what is artificial intimacy? It's when we're not arguing, we're not taking each other on. We're not really speaking up for what our needs are in a way that supports our individual needs and the relationship needs. Or, yeah, we're in the same room together, but one is looking at their phone and the other is feeling like, well, we're not really spending any time together, and one is saying, yeah, but I'm here, like I'm right here. But if you are distracted by the phone, like that's not connection. Um, so artificial intimacy is sort of the way we've been, society or culture has taught us what intimacy is, and it's not really so. Taking each other on, addressing the problems leads to deeper connection and more true intimacy.
Mm. So let me see if I understand this correctly. So we are taught in movies that intimacy is just I tell you what I want and you get me that or whatever, or I can just be myself, whichever that means around you, and you accept me for that. But what that can also lead to is maybe you're just not saying everything you want because you don't want to start any conflict, and then you're growing apart as well. So you have to be able to like talk to people about things that you are not comfortable with and have those conversations without them like maybe shutting down or walking away or saying, well, that's not what I want. So I don't care what you want. Things like that come up.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an art to it. There's an art and skill to developing that intimacy, to really being able to speak up for what you want in a way that preserves the relationship. And we aren't taught those skills. We're actually usually taught the opposite.
Hmm.
I say that the opposite of intimacy is irrelevance, not distance, right? Because you can be in a relationship where you're never speaking up for your needs. And so you begin to feel like, I don't matter. Yeah, we never fight, but I don't matter here. Or if you do speak up for your needs, your partner isn't hearing them, taking them seriously, and really addressing them. And so you become irrelevant, right? We can erase ourselves, we can make ourselves irrelevant, and the response of our partner can make us experience that irrelevance. Um, it's, true intimacy is really being seen, heard, and understood, even when you have a different perspective than your partner. Um, so,
I get a lot of men that, you know, sometimes reach out and they will be in maybe marriages for a long time and then they always kind of say this one thing like it came out of nowhere when she left. It came out of nowhere. And I'm always like, did it come out of did she ever ask for something and you're like, I don't need to do that because I'm doing this, or just kind of like disengaged, or like they think, and I think this is because of our culture. The culture has kind of told men all you got to do is provide. That's it. And
yeah,
now women can provide too. So they're like, I need a little more than that. I'm gonna need a little bit more, just a little bit more. And they're just like, well, I provided. That's what my dad did. And he wasn't there all the time. And he didn't sit down with my mom and have all these, long conversations, or they didn't go out for walks and they didn't do, the little things that women like to do to connect. They didn't do that. And my mom was fine with it. Well, we don't know that first. And second of all, like women nowadays, they don't need to provide as much as the intimacy part. And this is where like the men were not taught that. And then also, I'm not going to just pick on the men because then the women, the women will be super demanding and
yes,
sometimes downright rude. Like, you have to do this. You better do this. You better like give me this and that and the other. And it's just like with both sides, it's a recipe for like complete disaster, and I just see like they're
absolutely.
not understanding each other at all anymore, and they have no examples.
Yeah, yeah, uh, yeah. We are demanding more of our romantic relationships now than at any other point in history. And we don't have the skills for what we're asking for. I teach the skills for what people are asking for through relational life therapy, which is the type of couples therapy that I provide. It was created by Terry Real. He's the author of several books. And what you're describing of the old way, of the old roles, right? That are typically gender specific, they don't work anymore. They don't work anymore. And coming out of the blue, like you're saying, with many men, I literally just got off a session with a gentleman who is waking up because his wife is saying, I'm out of here. And it unfortunately often takes uh, that strong a stance, what I call the nuclear option, before typically a woman, but not always, feels heard. Um, and that's partly because we haven't been taught to listen and come through for our partners. And it's also because we haven't been taught how to speak up. It's one of the things that I really concentrate on is helping people speak up for their needs in a way that makes them more likely, it's not guaranteed, but more likely to be heard by their spouse, and in a way that says, I matter, you matter, our relationship matters. How can we come up with something that works for both of us? Rather than demanding, like you're saying, like you were describing before, or getting to the point of saying, the heck with this. I'm leaving. That nuclear option. The thing is, there's so many steps before that nuclear option in order to potentially be heard. Uh, but we don't know how to do it. Most of the time, what people do is complain, complain, complain. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. And the shift really needs to be moving from complaint to making requests and making it clear in those requests at times. Um, well, before I say that, it's much more vulnerable to make a request than to complain. When we complain, it's first of all, it's about the past. No one can change the past. I haven't met anyone who can go into a time machine and change it, although be nice. And it's much less vulnerable to complain because making a request, there's always the possibility that the other person says no or doesn't follow through on what the request is. And there's loneliness, there's grief in that we experience when we don't get what we ask for. Um, so some of the skill is learning to shift from complaint to request. And the other piece is it's okay to have a bottom line. And far too often, we're not taught, particularly women are not taught that it's okay to have a bottom line. And the bottom line does not have to be, I'm leaving the relationship. The bottom line can be um, many steps before that. So let me just make up something. What would be a bottom line? Uh, you in the past have been late. It's not okay with me for us to arrive at things late. I'm asking you to be ready to go at 5 o'clock. And if you're not ready to go by then, and we're both in the car, 5 o'clock, I'm gonna take my own car and go without you. Right? And then actually following through on it. Not standing there at 5 o'clock going, come on, why aren't you ready? I told you needed you. No, you don't have to say any of those things. You just get in the car and you go. Um, the consequences for not following through on something that's agreed to or uh, is really reasonable thing to do. We do it in other areas of our lives, but not so much with our partners. Um, and of course, an ultimate bottom line, if someone is not um, following through on things that are agreed upon, another one of the skills that's so necessary is to learn to negotiate, which is very different from compromise, but learning to negotiate and talk about the requests, the things that I need. Okay, what do we need to do to put that in place and negotiate it, and then you have a contract with someone. You have a contract with your partner, and that personal accountability of following through on your contract. Okay, yes, I agree. I am late often, and you're asking me to be ready at 5 o'clock for the party we're going to next Saturday. I will be ready at 5 o'clock. Great. Now you've made a contract. Okay. And in relationships, it's really important to follow through on those contracts. It builds trust. So now it's Saturday. It's 4:45. Are you ready? Are you going to be ready at 5 o'clock? Holding yourself accountable to what you agreed to. And knowing, you know what, if I'm not ready, she's gonna go or he's gonna go in the car on their own. Do I really want that to happen? I really don't. Like, we're going to this party together. I really want us to go together. I'm gonna make sure I'm ready at 5 o'clock. Um, yeah, I don't know. Tell me what is coming up and
Okay. So I get a lot of people who the newer generation, the younger ones, they're having a lot of problems dating, um, especially with the social media thing going on. So they're like, okay, I got a girlfriend, I really care about her, but she's on the internet all the time posting stuff that's like a little bit maybe scantily clad or whatever. I feel uncomfortable with that. She tells me I'm jealous. And then I have the opposite from like the girl's point of view. He's on social media posting stuff, and like I don't know why he's liking girls' photos all the time. It's like it sends a bad signal. It makes me look bad. So I have these two situations that keep coming up with the younger kids. So like, how can they navigate these situations, which I didn't have?
I didn't have them either, and I'm very grateful I didn't have them. I must say there's aspects that are much more complicated for this generation because of social media and the internet. Um, and what I would say is that's really connected to boundaries, and boundaries that are focused on what are the boundaries we're creating as a couple for our lives, right? Again, it's we thinking, not just I thinking. So, yes, when you were single and liking lots of women's photos, maybe that was fine. Like, that's you get to set your own boundaries. That's fine. Or um, you were posting scantily clad stuff. That's fine. Like, that's your choice. Now you're coming together with another person who has other expectations of a relationship or needs for themselves with regards to boundaries when they're in a relationship. These things need to be negotiated. And you can stand your ground and say, well, I was doing this before, so why do I have to change now? Well, you don't. But if you want to be in a relationship with this particular person, it's in your best interest to address what is a concern for them. And that's part of being in a relationship, is taking into account the impact of what you're doing or not doing has on the other person. So there's a shift that reasonably needs to be made when you move from singlehood or dating into a more committed relationship. If you want it to be successful, I mean, that's just sort of the reality of it. If you don't want to make those adjustments to the impact what you're doing has on another person, maybe you want to stay single. And that's a choice. That's like, there's no judgment about that. That's fine. But if you want a successful relationship, it does mean taking into account how what you're doing or not doing impacts the other person. And that's a hard shift for many people to make in this day and age for lots of different reasons, cultural reasons, particularly here in the West. Um, and from my perspective, a really important one. We're in a culture that's far too individualistic and self centered,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's not doing us any good as a whole.
The other thing that
What do
I
you,
see, oh, sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Well, I'm just curious what you think, the younger generation that comes to you would say about what I'm saying.
Well, they've been programmed um their whole lives that it's all about them, that it's me first, and it's my truth, it's what I want, and if you don't like it, that's your problem. And when they're both taught this, I don't know what you can do to get them together.
Yeah, it's a real barrier. Um, and a healthy relationship uh, looks at the impact what I'm doing or not doing has on the other person. This extreme individualism uh, will make for a lot of unhappy relationships, a lot of
Mhm.
destructive relationships.
And I totally get that, especially in the beginning of relationships, there's kind of like the negotiation period where you're trying to work out your boundaries. And sometimes people kind of like test each other's boundaries to see what they can get away with. I understand there's a pull and push, in the beginning, but it needs to be settled. And then you need to stick to it. You can't continuously be pushing and pulling on boundaries. That's not how relationships work. And people are just like, well, so and so does this, I should be able to do this. And they're looking at the internet, they're looking at everybody else's life, they're trying to say, well, this person can do it. I'm like, but that person not you. Or they'll compare themselves to celebrities. Celebrities have fake relationships for promoting movies. These are not real people, they're not
Yeah,
real relationships. We need to stop looking at celebrities.
yeah,
Yeah, you need to look at successful, real relationships in your life.
yeah. Which unfortunately are hard to find, right?
Mhm.
Unfortunately hard to find. I, the comparison is really something that gets in the way for sure. And looking at yourself only, um, it's just really going to keep you disconnected from others, right? And part of being in a relationship is wanting to connect, but you don't get to connect just on your terms. That's not connection.
Yeah, another thing is like people will say like, "Oh, I'm lonely. I don't have like any friends or whatever." And then you ask them, "Okay, so what do you do when you had friends? Like what did you do to like continue the relationship, whatever?" And it's just like, "No, everybody's like waiting for somebody else to come and make plans or call them or to follow through with something. Nobody's actually going out there and putting themselves out there and like setting things up anymore. They're just like very passive. Like it doesn't come to me and I'm
Uh,
mad."
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's one of the fallout, I think, piece of the fallout from social media and the internet is that passivity and waiting for it to come to them rather than connecting to their own agency, their own um, ability to affect change in their lives, in their world. And to get beyond that is, like you're saying, all right, if you're feeling lonely, putting the cure for that, if we put it that way, in the hands of somebody else, they need to do this, they should be doing that, I'm waiting for this or that, is uh, giving over your own power. And I'll connect it back to artificial intimacy, right? Because scrolling through and seeing what other people are doing and hitting like and making a comment on their Instagram post or whatever, we think of that as connection. It's so far from real, genuine connection. It's much more difficult and it's much more risky to call someone up on the phone. Does anyone answer their phone anymore? I know I'm saying that partly because I don't answer my phone when it rings. So I'm guilty of it too, unless I know who it is, right? Like, um, but that's riskier because the other person could say, I'm busy, I can't. Uh, and so staying behind that screen is a safer place, but it's not a more connected place. Uh, and so taking the risk of actually joining groups that are of your interest and meeting face to face with those people and having conversations and connecting in that way is taking action from a much more powerful place than waiting for someone to provide you with what you may feel is a right, let's say, to
Yeah. I mean,
connect with
I
someone.
am very good with, like, I guess, rejection, because, I grew up in a time where you had to go put yourself out there for friendship or for dating or for whatever. You had to go and talk to the person because you might never see them again. And this
Right.
was like, your one chance. And yeah, like 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, thanks, I'm not interested, or oh, I'm busy, or they'll just blow you off or whatever. And you have to just like let it slide off. But I feel like nowadays people are so adverse to rejection that if somebody does come up to them and give them any attention, they will hold on to them tighter than they should. And some of those people are the people that they probably shouldn't be holding on to.
Yeah. Yeah. Kat, what you described about growing up in a time where this was the only way we could, what that did was a really interesting thing, even neurologically, okay? That when the main choice was to either not connect or take the risk of going up to someone, talking to them, and then turning you away, that built an emotional strength, right? And the more you did it, the stronger that muscle, that emotional muscle got. So, like you said, I'm really okay with rejection, like because you've practiced it over and over and over again. And it's amazing how true that is emotionally, just in terms of how our brain works, that we can build those emotional muscles as well. And unfortunately, so much of culture now shifting away from this direct connection to very indirect connection, um, and our connection weakens those muscles rather than strengthens them.
Hmm.
So, it may seem old-fashioned to some of the younger generation, but it's what works, uh, is putting yourself out there and
Hmm.
experiencing the rejection. Yeah, that person's
Yeah.
not interested in chatting with you. Nope, that connection didn't work. That fell totally
Yeah,
flat. Yep, on to
exactly.
the next one.
Mhm. And I'm not saying it's not hard. I feel like it's harder now than it was even when I was young, because people are so not used to someone coming up to them that they have their guard up, or they'll kind of like attack
Yeah.
them. I've seen, because I have like some very young friends that I hang out with. They're like in their 20s, or like the little babies, and I'll go out with them to events, and these guys would come up to talk to them, and they will, as a collective of girls, just like say, "Who do you think you are to come and talk to me?" And I'm just like, "Oh my God, you're crushing this poor guy. Like, he's trying so hard." And they're not even like unattractive. They're very cute guys. They're just like, these girls are just mean or something. And I
Yeah.
think that makes it harder, because when I was growing up, there was mean girls. I'm not gonna lie. There was mean, but there was
Sure.
a few. Most girls were not mean. There was the few that were like untouchable that were mean. We've always had that. But now it's like, that's kind of like all girls, because all girls have this idea like they're at the top of the food chain now, because they get all the likes and attention
Uh-huh.
on the internet. So now they're like, I'm the best. So if you're not this, this, and this, I don't have to talk to you because you're beneath me, which is wild, because that's not the reality. A like is not the same thing as having any. No.
Yeah. And you're highlighting something with that, which is the notion of that sense of being above anybody else, better than anybody else. It's a big part of what gets in the way of having healthy connections. If you don't have the likes, if you don't have the number of followers, if you don't do things the way I do them, I'm better than you. Um, it's part of the work that I do with the couples that I see, is helping them recognize when they are behaving or thinking in that way, how destructive it is to their relationships.
Hmm.
Um, we're really used to, in the field of psychology, addressing shame when people feel overwhelming shame, feel poorly about themselves, the experiences they've had that feed that. But what the practice of psychology has been much less effective or even aware of or addressing is the notion of grandiosity, and that's what you're describing. It's grandiose to believe that because I have all these likes, I'm better than you, and look down my nose at you and not talk to you. It's really grandiose.
Hmm.
Um, and it happens on both sides. Gender doesn't matter. That can show up no matter what. And healthy connection knows and is connected to the fact that I am no better than anybody else. Uh, that we are all worthy of connection and belonging simply because we exist on this planet. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove it. Um, being part of this club or that club doesn't make you worthy. Uh, the number of likes you have, the clothes you wear, the car you drive, the accomplishments that you have don't make you better than anybody else. Um, and reconnecting to that notion is an essential part of what we refer to as relational recovery. Right? Just like with addiction recovery, relational recovery, the understanding of um, equality, um, no better than and no less than anybody else. Uh, and I think it's a lot of what brings couples to my practice without realizing it, as they're experiencing the effect of grandiosity on their relationship and really struggle with how it generally doesn't get addressed.
Mm. So, what are some ways that we can use conflict, or what are some ways that conflict can increase or decrease intimacy?
So, the importance of conflict is really key to intimacy, right? And the ability to negotiate and navigate conflict regularly is going to make you closer. Uh, so it's sort of like conflict is the necessary friction between two people that without that friction, there's nothing to grab onto. It's like you enjoy being with each other because of your differences and because of some your similarities. But the inevitable conflict that's going to come up because you are two different people, um, working through it actually helps you understand the other person more and you be understood more by the other person and then working together as a team. And, most people come to me saying, our communication, that's the problem, is our communication, which is a statement that is ubiquitous and tells me absolutely nothing, right? It just doesn't tell us anything. And what's beneath that is what each person is really saying is, I don't feel heard or understood by the other person. And it's through conflict in a skillful way, learning how to do conflict well, that you will actually become heard and understood by the other person and be able to hear and understand them. So, I teach skills on how to do that, which part of which I was talking about before is learning to shift from making complaints to making requests, learning to deal with your own reactivity in the moment, um, and be mindful of when you are shifting from actually interacting with the person to reacting to them and being self-protective, which we all do. I mean, nobody escapes it. It's part of how our brains work. There's no shame in that. I get reactive too, and I manage that reactivity myself. It's my job to manage that reactivity. It's not my husband's job to manage that reactivity. It's mine. So I've talked and talked and lost sight of your questions.
Okay. So I have one. So what if, okay, you have a couple and whenever the woman, I don't want to pick on the man, but let's just pick on for this one. Okay. Let's say whenever the woman asks the man something like, oh, can you do this? Or I need this from you or whatever, he gets upset because in his mind, he's like, oh, I'm not appreciated. And then he like disengages. How can he regulate his emotions and how can maybe she approach him so that he doesn't disengage as much?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's sort of key, right? She can try and approach him in a different way that may make it more likely that he'll remain engaged. But there's no guarantee because the thing is, we can't control anybody else. We can't stop anybody from feeling anything. That's trying to manage somebody else's emotions and behaviors, and that's a setup for failure. So in this case, she can try and approach him in a different way. Uh, and his work is to recognize his own reactivity, that somehow he's telling himself a story. When she asks me for something, the story I tell myself is, she doesn't appreciate me. And when I think that story to myself, I feel defensive and I behave defensively. So, first of all, we all tell ourselves stories. Like, the real at the basic level, there's a stimulus, a thing that happens, and our brains, which are meaning-making machines, makes meaning of the thing that happened, and then we have feelings that develop from that meaning that we give the thing that happened. Right? That's all an internal process. And it's different for each person because we each have our own unique histories, families that we grew up in, experiences that we've had that shape how that pattern goes. So the work on his side is to recognize the story he tells himself and to take ownership of that story rather than what tends to happen, which is blaming the other person for that story. She makes me feel this way. No one can make us feel anything. We're responsible for our own feelings. And, a lot of this, what I'm describing, it's not easy. And sometimes you need support. You need a third party to help you learn how to do this stuff. But the main skill for both people, for anybody in any relationship, is learning to recognize when you're experiencing what we call that whoosh. Something happens and you feel that whoosh, right? That whoosh is reactivity. And it shifts us from the part of our brain that wants to connect with the other person into the part of our brain that wants to protect ourselves. And so we go into behaviors that are protective, like defensiveness, like withdrawing, things like that, screaming, yelling, all those kinds of things. And so the main skill is to learn to regulate that whoosh and to know, all right, I'm feeling that whoosh right now. Probably not the best time for me to say anything or do anything. I need to take a breath, take a pause, take a beat. Because it is in that pause that we can choose to do something different than we've always done in the past. So instead of getting defensive in that pause, you can take a breath. Okay, I'm feeling reactive. Let me do something different. Instead of getting defensive, I'm going to get curious. I'm going to ask a question. She's asked me to do, I don't know, take the car to the shop, whatever. Let me find out what's going on for her. What is it she's needing beyond the surface of that request? Right? So it'd be getting curious, asking a question. So, sweetheart, you just asked me to take the car to the shop. Can you tell me what's going on for you? What you're needing help with something? Tell me what you're struggling with. That's totally different than getting defensive, right? And will likely help shift the dance that goes on between two people over and over and over again on repeat. Getting curious is a really helpful skill. But
Mhm.
first, you have to recognize when you are being reactive and understand and know the things that trigger you into that reactivity. And the thing is, so often, and I honestly hear this in younger generations when I talk with some of the younger clients that I have, which is really hard for me to say because I don't think of myself as the older generation. I totally don't. I am not there yet. No. Um, but what I tend to hear them say is, this is my attachment style. I'm very anxious. And so there's this expectation that their partner should manage or know how to be with them or behave in a certain way with them because of their attachment style. And this is where I differ a bit on certainly lots of the TikTok and Instagram posts about attachment style, which is it is not our partner's responsibility to manage around our attachment style. It's personal responsibility. I know I have an anxious attachment style, and therefore I need to manage it in this way or that way. But we see a lot of other ways of talking about that. And then the expectation that, well, they're not loving me the way I need to be loved. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you are connected, married to, in partnership with a flawed human being. There is no way to be loved perfectly, to love somebody else perfectly, or to take in love perfectly. Like, that's just not how it works, which is a hard pill to swallow for many people.
So there's apparently an increase now in older people getting divorced, like empty nesters or people even above 50 getting divorced. What have you seen with that generation?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I have seen many couples who, first of all, having children is known to be one of the things that plummets marital satisfaction. And so the child rearing years are a very difficult time for marriages for many different reasons, and some of which are the expectation that uh, the relationship be child focused, doing anything and everything for the children, their activities, uh, having them in as many activities as possible. I say sometimes parenthood is now uh, sort of the goal of parenthood is to put out the best possible product in 18 years. And all the things that go into putting out that best possible product, to get into the best college, to have the best opportunities, and so on and so forth, which really puts a lot of pressure on parents and children and loses sight of the goal of parenting and raising children. Um, so it creates like this pressure cooker where everything is focused on the kids. And many times couples come to me at the stage of empty nest stage of life, having said to themselves in years prior they were unsatisfied with the marriage and were just gonna wait it out until the kids went to college. It's very common. And part of that is because there's so much focus on the children and their needs, so little focus on the relationship and the needs of the relationship, let alone each individual in the relationship. Um, and not standing up to each other, not taking each other on. Uh, and so by the time the children do reach leaving the nest, the parents look at each other and say, "What do we have left in common? What are we fighting for? What held us together is leaving the house." Um, and also things that many and look, women are initiating more divorce than men in the older years, maybe in general as well. I don't want to misquote the actual statistics, but um, part of that is because women are no longer satisfied with having a partner that is just a provider. They want an equal, emotionally intelligent partner. And in that regard, our culture, our society has let men down and taught them actually quite the opposite of what it is to be emotionally intelligent. And women are not satisfied with it anymore. And they're not going to live out the rest of their lives without that emotionally intelligent connection.
So, what can you kind of describe what does an emotionally intelligent man look like? Because a lot of guys, they're like, oh, you want me to cry a lot. You want me to complain a lot. You want me to come to you with all my problems and drama and throw that on you. And then when I do that, you get overwhelmed and you don't like it. So you don't want me emotionally available. So what does actually emotionally available look like in a man?
Well, what you describe in when men say, then when I do that, you get upset, you don't like it, right? It's true. It is part of what happens. It's like careful what you wish for. If you want your guy to be connected to his emotions, get ready to hear some things that make you uncomfortable, that you don't really like to hear. Uh, so, both sides of the equation have their work to do for sure, and that's a part of it. Um, an emotionally intelligent human being, right? Doesn't matter what their gender is. An emotionally intelligent human being is connected to their own emotions rather than disconnected from them. And men under patriarchy are the core wound is to be disconnected from others and focused on themselves, but not their emotions, right? Focused on their achievements, focused on producing. And so emotional intelligence for men is reconnecting to their own emotions, their own needs, and coming down from outer space in a way. When I was talking about grandiosity earlier in our conversation, grandiosity leaves you disconnected from others, unaware of how your behavior impacts other people. And so, emotionally intelligent human being is aware of that, is aware of how when I arrive late, it impacts the other person, and that matters to me. So it's coming down from that defensive position of, tough. I was at work, I had to deal with the boss. Like, that's what I provide. That's what I'm here. Aren't you appreciative of that? It's understanding that what you do impacts other people and caring about that. Oftentimes, people who are disconnected in that way, they're not in pain. It's not uncomfortable for them. But everyone around them is in pain. And so it's helping them recognize the consequences of that to their health, to their livelihood, to their longevity. Um, and emotionally connected human beings know how to show empathy, know how to be genuinely empathic to another person, and not afraid of another person's feelings. Oftentimes, people feel overwhelmed, unsure of what to do, how to respond when someone is emotional or feeling something very strongly, and tend to want to fix it or make it go away because it makes them uncomfortable. And empathy is a skill, it's something everybody can learn. And so, an emotionally intelligent human being knows how to connect to empathy.
Yeah. So it doesn't look like just coming home and complaining about your boss and screaming at your wife. It's like, oh, this happened at work and I want to talk about it or whatever. It's more like speaking with them and not at them.
Yes. Yes. Tell me about your day. Oh, wow. That must have been really frustrating for you to experience that. I know you experienced it last week too. That sucks. No wonder you're so tired. I get it. Right? That's empathy.
Hmm.
Don't have to fix it. Don't have to make it go away. Doesn't mean there's, something to change. The beautiful thing is so much relational healing and connection can happen through some things that are actually very simple, not easy, but simple, which is to hear and understand another person's perspective and experience, even when it's different from your own.
So, I mean, I think this has been very important for people to hear because a lot of what I see online is just if they don't do what you want, replace them.
Yeah,
Or
get rid of
yeah,
them.
yeah, it's just like just move on,
Cut
or
'em
like
out.
they ask
Yeah,
for too much, you're not supposed to do that. So find somebody else,
yeah.
which is the complete opposite if you want to have a relationship with any human ever in your
Any
life.
That's right. It's, sort of the throwaway society, that mentality that we've created.
Hmm.
Everything is expendable. But relationships take work. Relationships take working through things. You know, my mentor Esther Perel says the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. Well, if you're constantly cutting people off, throwing them out, you're going to have a very lonely existence. And there's a loneliness epidemic,
Hmm.
right? The Surgeon General talks about that. And being lonely is as uh, impactful on our physical health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So, learning to do relationships well serves your health, serves your longevity, let alone serves your children and their futures.
Could you tell everybody how they can work with you and any resources that you have that they can check out?
Oh, sure. I appreciate that. I'm happy to connect with whomever is interested in learning more and getting better at uh, their relationships, strengthening their relationships. So, my website, which is really the easiest way to find out everything that I do, is togethercouplescounseling.com. And I work with people in a variety of ways. Uh, I do 2-day intensives with couples in my office. They come from all over the country and meet with me for 2 days. It's just me and them for the 2 days, to really help them get a significant start on what the work is to do to help make things better. So that's one way. And of course, I provide weekly therapy for uh, people here in my state of Maryland. I'm in Maryland. Um, I offer twice a year a relationship skills boot camp, and we host it in person in beautiful Annapolis, Maryland, at a gorgeous hotel. It's a great place to have a weekend getaway. So we do it with there's several couples, right? We do it. It's a group workshop essentially, and across the 2 days, I teach you the skills of living a relational life. And our next one happens to be April 5th and 6th of 2025. And all the information on how to register for that is on my website. And you can always just get on my email. You can take the two free either one's a quiz. I have a quiz about your conflict style. So if you're interested in figuring out, well, how do I show up in conflict? What is that like? How do I do that? I have a quiz on my website that you can take, and then you're on my email list. So you'll get information from me, just helpful information about relationships, and of course, the things that I offer. Um, and the other freebie on my website are the 5 pitfalls that we tend to make in our relationships. So you can learn a little bit about this. The 5 losing strategies. Uh, Again, all from relational life therapy. So yeah, the best way is to go to my website, and you can always email me. If you have a question, just reach out to me. I answer all of my emails personally. So be glad to, just connect.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with before we go?
Well, it is my belief, so I will share that it is our relationships that matter most in this world, in this lifetime, this one short lifetime that we each have. And so investing in strengthening them, it's worth it.
So
And if you're
true.
struggling, you don't have to do it alone. We're not meant to do it alone. We're meant to do it in community.
Well, I'm going to put all your information in the show notes, and I hope everybody reaches out so that we can have better, stronger relationships going forward and kind of heal like a broken culture. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat.
Start the revolution, let the truth begin. Wake up, defeating lies. Control the media's got you hypnotized. Trust authority, they'll take your soul. Break the chains, find your own control. Wake up.